Hello, this is Breakfast with Tim Muffett and Naga Munchetty.
A warning that Typhoon Haiyan could be a sign of what's to come. Good morning, it's Sunday the 17th of November.
Also to come.
And Philip Avery has the weather.
Let's get to our main story. There are calls for more to be done to tackle climate change after the devastation caused by Typhoon Haiyan. The UK Disasters Emergency Committee says the storm should be a wake-up call for United Nations delegates who are meeting this week.
The 14 aid agencies say the typhoon has offered a glimpse of the extreme weather events which could become more common if action isn't taken. Tens of thousands of people in the Philippines are now receiving emergency supplies as the aid effort gets underway.
A leading expert on public health has called for a discussion about lowering the age of consent from 16.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, says he wants the coalition to make another increase in the amount people are able to earn before paying income tax.
He's calling for the personal income tax allowance to be increased from £10,000 to £10,500 just before the general election in 2015. The Prime Minister has ordered an inquiry into the tactics of trade unions in the wake of a bitter industrial dispute at Grangemouth in Scotland.
Downing Street says the review will be headed by a leading QC and will examine allegations of intimidation and the underlying causes of several industrial disputes. Political correspondent Chris Mason. So, Chris, what will this review look at precisely in London? Thanks ever so much indeed for updating us. Thank you.
Banks are being urged to cut their customer phone charges after the consumer group Which found that 3/4 of phone lines were high-rate numbers.
An EU directive banning the use of expensive numbers for customer helplines comes into force next year, but financial firms are currently excluded. OK, so it is 6:10 and Philip will have the weather in a few minutes' time.
11.5 million people have now been affected by the devastating typhoon that struck the Philippines last weekend, so according to aid agencies.
Large amounts of relief supplies are now starting to reach the islands. The Royal Navy ship HMS Daring is due to arrive this morning.
We are hoping to speak to one of the aid workers from Save the Children in a few minutes' time, though let's speak to our correspondent Rico Heason, who's in to Clothman now. And Rico, we've spoken over the past few days. You've been in Cebu as well. We can see behind you the devastation to the infrastructure, but at least some good news that the aid is getting to people who need it. It's good in the face of tragedy to hear that a country is getting back on its feet and rebuilding the spirit of the Filipinos living strong. Thanks very much, Rico, and no doubt we'll speak soon.
Now, aid agencies say over a third of the people affected are children and they need food, water, medicine and protection. Kat Carter, who works for Save the Children UK, can speak to us now on the phone from Tacloban. Kat, just tell us, when did you arrive there and what's the scene been like? Has it been what you expected it to be? Thanks ever so much indeed.
It's 19 minutes past 6. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. Our main stories this morning. We're going to take a look at what the weather's going to be like for the rest of the weekend.
Ominous, apparently.
We're on the turn.
I know.
We're on the turn. Oh, Philip, there's a dramatic image to wake up to this morning. Fantastic.
Isn't it?
Philip, don't
time
you?
For the thermals, though. No mess here. No mess.
Get those thermals out. OK, see you soon, Philip.
Now, the number of Asian people signing up as bone marrow donors has increased tenfold, thanks to a campaign centred around a 2-year-old boy from the Midlands.
Gaurav Bains has a rare immune condition, which means he could develop leukemia if he doesn't receive a transplant by Christmas. Olivia Richwald went to meet him. To
be on the decline, but BBC News has been finding out about its growing popularity. So nice in the age of the internet, an old tradition like amateur radio lives on.
Warms your cockles,
made me very
doesn't it?
happy.
Good.
I don't know why,
Good.
it just has. You can see more web tales on the BBC News website at bbc.co.uk/magazine.
Also coming up on the programme. Hello, this is Breakfast with Tim Muffett and Naga Munchetty.
Coming up before 7, we'll get the weather with Philip.
First, though, it's exactly 6:30. Let's bring you a summary of this morning's main news. There are calls for more to be done to tackle climate change after the devastation caused by Typhoon Haiyan. Here, police are trying to establish whether a body recovered from a well at a house in Surrey is male or female.
A leading expert on public health has called for a discussion about lowering the age of consent from 16.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, says that he wants the coalition to make another increase in the amount that people are able to earn before paying income tax.
The Prime Minister has ordered an inquiry into the tactics of trade unions in the wake of a bitter industrial dispute at Grangemouth in Scotland.
Leading health experts warn that drug-resistant strains of bacteria are one of the gravest threats facing modern medicine.
Criminal gangs are increasingly targeting valuable works of art and antiques in the UK, according to senior police officers.
England,
yes,
bit battered,
Yeah.
but not as battered as many feared.
Wasn't
no, it was an interesting mixed weekend. We had rugby union and rugby league. Yesterday's New Zealand in the rugby union for England, and they were doing very well in the lead, but just couldn't quite edge it. It wasn't quite the thriller that we had last year. And rugby league, as we've got the World Cup semi-finals coming up next weekend at Wembley, big stadium, hoping for a sellout there. But yeah, England through in the quarters, and the World Cup coming up in 2 years' time in this country. So that's what everyone's pushing forward towards, and that's what Lancaster's looking towards. So yeah, despite that injury to Rob Shaw's face.
Black eyes, it's supposed to put raw steak on it.
Raw steak.
Yeah.
Steak.
I think it's just something.
I think you might
cold,
need something a
isn't
bit
it?
more than raw steak on that.
That wouldn't really work on a rugby pitch either, would it? Having a raw steak on the pitch. I don't think
No, you never know. You never know what they have on the sidelines. Carthy, you don't. Carthy, thanks very much. We're going to stick to the sporting theme. We're talking about one of South Africa's greatest rugby players, Just van der Westhuizen. He was part of the World Cup winning Springbok side of 1995. But since then, life has been very different for him, especially in the last 2 years.
Yes, he was diagnosed with motor neurone disease in 2011 and given just 2.5 years to live. Now the world-renowned scrum half has travelled to Scotland to work with scientists to raise awareness of the illness. Rob Flett went to meet him. Extraordinary story. Best of luck to him. It is now 6:44 and you're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories this morning.
We'll wrap up. Well,
Okay.
Thanks, Philip. Time now, 6:48. Now, no one likes wading through burger wrappers and plastic bottles. But a campaign group says that is exactly what might happen if our streets weren't cleaned up for us. The chief executive of Keep Britain Tidy. Is this campaign a result of just frustration that people aren't listening and people are still littering?
Absolutely.
Fact. And this really surprised me. Most people say they hate litter and litterers.
Yep.
But according to these facts, more than 60% of the population still drop litter.
Yes.
And are we talking like burger cases or paper cups? Or are we talking cigarettes?
Then how's it going to work? You clean one side of the street, you leave the other,
Yeah.
and the idea is people go, oh my goodness, they appreciate what you
what
do.
we're trying-
They don't actually appreciate.
There is a
Council tax. Of course you should be cleaning up my streets.
yeah. Well, you know.
Leave litter knowing that it will be picked up by someone who's coming around collecting it, and that sets in motion a worrying habit, if you like. Is that true?
I think.
Have you ever dropped litter?
Have I ever dropped
Yeah.
litter? I would never say never.
Whenever we can.
Absolutely.
Very interesting,
Pleasure
thank
talking
you.
to you. Let's hope it works.
Thank you.
Time now, 6:52. It might be unhelpful staff, it may be long queues or untidy shops. It does seem, though, that there is plenty to get annoyed about when it comes to customer service.
A new survey suggests that when these things happen, we either walk out or give up, and ultimately that means less money changing hands. We'll discuss this in a moment, but first we ask people in Newcastle about their shopping experiences. Interesting. Joining us now is Helen Dewdney. What should we be doing? What are we doing wrong?
What the customer service doing wrong, or what we're not doing
What
about
are
it?
customers doing wrong when they experience bad customer service and not complaining? Do you think we should be doing more? That we don't like to complain in this country. We feel a bit awkward about it.
I think
It's the 17th of November, and I don't want to upset anyone on a Sunday morning, but if anyone is like me and hasn't even thought about Christmas and Christmas shopping yet, we're all going to be getting a little bit twitchy. And when I'm going to go out and do my Christmas shopping, if I have to go out among the hordes and I get bad customer service, it's easier for me to just walk out the shop than to take time to complain, because I just have too much to do.
Yeah.
Isn't that half of the problem? And also,
Yes.
perhaps, shops take advantage of that, particularly at this time of year.
yes,
If you just lose your temper. That's
yeah,
the-
and you
that's what we
forget.
do.
I forget that
Retailers are becoming better at acknowledging issues that customers have, because often there's a feeling that actually, what's the point in me complaining, because they're not going to take any notice unless I have 500 people behind me. My one voice isn't going to be heard.
Option of going on, say, to Twitter, for example, and that puts fear into a lot of companies, doesn't it? Because if you do create a momentum, then they're going to take more notice than they would have done, presumably, in years gone by if you just wrote a letter and you were the only person who knew about it.
What should people watch out for, and what should people be mindful of when they're shopping now and they have a bad experience and they want to have it resolved there and then? What's the best way to tackle it? Much?
Happy shopping. Don't get too angry, okay? It's Christmas.
now going to be
They're looking out for you.
Yeah.
I'm sure they
Helen
won't
Dewdney,
say that
thank
at all.
you. Coming up in the next half hour.
Stay with us, headlines coming up.